Well, how was our turnout today, Brenda? How many folks do we have here?
It's been fantastic. I didn't check the numbers from the last thing we were just in, but we had, I think, well over 100 people in the big sessions yesterday. We have over 400 people registered, so it's been great.
Very cool. Well, I can see some beautiful faces out there on the screen. So hello, everybody. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Thomas Vavrin. I am the director of Audit Advantage. We're a sister company of Process Point that does credit card processing, but on our side of the business, we handle things like cyber security and cost reduction and some other consulting solutions for the payment processing space. So I wanted to put together basically a real simple presentation that has to do with some of the cybersecurity threats that are plaguing people as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And if you didn't know, cybersecurity threats are on the rise, and that's all a result of what's going on with all this COVID stuff. And I wanted us to get kind of a high-level understanding of what's going on, how you can identify these problems, and also how you can protect yourself. So let's go ahead and jump into our first slide here. So first of all, because of COVID-19, cybersecurity is more important than ever. In today's presentation, we're going to cover a few different topics. We're going to go over some of the most common cybersecurity threats. We're going to kind of coach you on how to spot them and some simple ideas on how you can avoid these things in the future. And importantly, you want to be aware of these cybersecurity threats because they can be a serious threat to your business and also to your customers. And then lastly, as a result of our partnership with IPI, we are going to provide everyone at IPI with a complimentary network scan. So you can scan your home network, your computer network, your office network, whatever it is, wherever you're working. Let's get that scanned and see if there are any threats or vulnerabilities that exist on that particular network. So we'll get to that at the very end, and we'll also do some Q&A. But to give you guys a background, and I think I touched on this earlier, cyber attacks during the COVID-19 pandemic are increasing exponentially. They are up by 400% since the beginning of the pandemic. And one of the most alarming things is that most of these cyber attacks can be prevented because the majority of them are actually caused by human error. So more importantly, just learning how to spot these kinds of things and how to avoid them is going to probably help you avoid the vast majority of these types of cyber attacks. All of this is a result of people working from home. They aren't protected by the normal safeguards that would be in place when they're working from the office or when they're working from one of the locations that you might manage, because typically you'll have security protocols in place, you'll have antivirus software on those systems and those kinds of things. So if you're working remotely, working from home, if you're connecting to unsecure networks, these are all the kinds of things that you're just going to want to be aware of. So the first thing let's talk about, phishing schemes. And so this is actually a real common type of issue where scammers are posing as a legitimate institution. They're going to try to trick you into giving away their personal information. The phishing scammers are going to try to exploit things like emotionally for you guys, things like your curiosity, your trust, your fear. A lot of times they'll pose as a government entity or a well-known business, somebody that you might trust. Actually, one of the most commonly increasing phishing scams is a result of the tool that we're using today, which is Zoom. And attackers know that because of the remote work environment, people are using Zoom more and more often. In fact, during the first 3 weeks of the pandemic, there were over 1,700 Zoom-related domains that were requested and actually parked by IP or website providers. So things like getzoom.com, zoom.us, those are the kinds of phishing types of websites that you might be coming up against. So even during our call today, you know, we just want to be aware of these types of scams. So I wanted to provide you guys with an example of a phishing email. We've probably all seen something like this. This is an example I found online where you know, it looks like it's coming from a legitimate source. It's coming from my university, and what it's doing is it's posing as a legitimate source that's looking to solicit some of your personal information. So if you look at things like this particular link right here, this could take you to a malicious website. It could actually even download malicious software, those kinds of things. And so I don't know, by a raise of hands, how many of you guys have seen something like this come through your email? I know I have. In fact, just this morning I got something that looked like it was coming from Netflix, and it was saying that my account was expired and that I needed to provide them with my login information so that I could continue using Netflix. And as we all know, Netflix is critical to everyone's happiness nowadays. So we've got an example of this phishing email, but you know, let's talk about some ways that you can avoid these sorts of phishing scams. You know, first of all, think before you click. When you take a look at these emails, be sure that you know, is this coming from a trusted source? And secondly, don't share your personal information freely online. You know, especially never share your passwords. One of the things that I learned after kind of doing some research on this presentation was that a lot of times I would actually click on a link that looked like it was coming from a trusted sender. And but now what I'm starting to do is I'm actually going to be copying and pasting those links directly into the address bar so that you know, so that you don't actually get misdirected to a malicious website or download some malicious software. One thing that I think is also important is using two-factor authentication. If you guys don't know what that means, it means when you type in your email or your login or user information and your password, you're prompted to perform a second authentication step. And that could mean a code being sent to your cell phone or to your web address, or I'm sorry, to your email, so that you know, it verifies that you are who you are when you're logging into that website. Then lastly, train yourself on how to identify these types of malicious emails. Do they look like they're coming from a trusted source? Do they, you know, do they use things like unusual grammar or things like that? You know, sorry for the pun, but if anything looks fishy, you know, make sure that you give it a second look as you kind of move forward with that particular website. The second kind of cyber security threat I want to talk about is spoofing. And the way that spoofing is different from phishing is that a lot of times a spoofed correspondence will look like it's actually coming from a trusted source. It could be a friend, it could be somebody that you bank with, those kinds of things. So, you know, actually, one of the most scary types of spoofing strategies that I've came across recently was, it's called a business email compromise scheme. And what happens here, and it was actually a mortgage professional that I'm colleagues with, but he was exchanging some correspondence with a friend of his, and his correspondence's email got spoofed. And so suddenly they were at the end of their transaction, and he was at the point where he was going to be sending a wire for you know, for some earnest money for a mortgage transaction. And it turns out that money got sent to the attacker, and he became a victim of a spoofing scam. So be careful, because this is where somebody is disguising themselves as a trusted source or a trusted business, and usually they're there to try to steal your information or send you to a malicious website. So spoofing attacks come in a whole variety of different looks. I mean, we're all familiar with the email spoofing. We just talked about phishing. That's a particular type of spoofing attack. The second one is actually a caller ID attack. And That is when somebody either sends you somebody makes a phone call and it looks like it might be coming from a particular geographical location, or it might even look like it might be coming from, you know, the IRS or something like that. So what these attackers have been able to do is they are able to disguise their phone number as somebody that looks like it's coming from a trusted source. So you might be more likely to pick up the phone, you might be more likely to share sensitive information, those kinds of things. GPS is another one. This is a type of spoofing attack that can actually provide inaccurate location on where you are or where you might be headed. Website spoofing is another common one where you might be trying to visit a website like Microsoft, but one of the letters might be off, so you can actually get sent to a malicious website as well. IP spoofing, again, that means like somebody might be trying to connect to your network using a malicious IP address. This can be particularly dangerous when you have a system that verifies or authenticates users based on their IP addresses from where they're coming from. And then the last one here is a text message. I actually got one of these the other day. It looked like it was coming from a local individual. I had some stuff posted on the classifieds. They sent me a text message. You know, they wanted me to send them some personal information before, you know, they wanted to handle that transaction over the classifieds. So don't be fooled by those things again. This example right here that I found online is actually particularly disturbing because what it looks like is, if you can see this, it looks like it might be coming from somebody that this particular individual knows. And it's coming from dude1@domain1.com. However, if you inspect this more closely, the reply to address is just off by one particular number here. So if for example, somebody replies to this particular email, they're going to be sending information to dude2@domain2.com. And, you know, I think we can all understand being aware of these kinds of things just can put you on a better alert to not be victim of these kinds of attacks. So some quick tips on how to avoid getting spoofed. Use caution when you're answering calls, emails, texts, or whatever. Don't share your personal information. Installing anti-spam software or antivirus software. You'll see this as a theme through probably through all the recommendations that we have here. A distributed denial of service protection software. That is when somebody actually can overtake or overwhelm your website with web traffic and those kinds of things. So there are softwares there to protect you. Again, be on the lookout for anything fishy, suspicious grammar, poor language, those kinds of things. Obviously, don't send your information to any Nigerian princes. And again, lastly, spoofing websites can be off by just one letter. And I talked about this earlier, you know, like Microsoft or micro-soft.com. You know, this can be an example of, you know, you might just be searching for a particular website, this pops up, and suddenly you're on a website that looks like Microsoft, but it's not. Let's talk about malware infections. This is probably the one that we're all the most familiar with. It's a malicious type of software that's designed to, you know, disrupt anything on your computer or gain unauthorized access to a computer system. So, you know, we're all familiar with things like viruses. If you don't know what some of these others are, you know, let me talk about them here. You know, viruses are intended to destroy functionality, corrupt your system, they delete info. A Trojan horse is a piece of malicious software that actually allows access to other malicious software. So it's kind of like a backdoor that can appear on your computer. Ransomware is actually one that we have seen a lot of lately. And if you're not familiar with ransomware, this is a particularly dangerous type of malware that basically holds your information hostage or threatens to expose your personal information unless you provide the individual with a particular type of ransom. And we've seen this a lot in the credit card processing environment. You know, folks getting into point of sale systems, you know, through malware, accessing credit card information. So folks that have recurring payments set up, all those kinds of things, suddenly they're held hostage. They can't collect their payment information. They can't run those transactions and those kinds of things. A couple others here. The last one, scareware. That's a malicious type of program that can basically scare somebody into, you know, buying unnecessary software or even malicious software. So I've had this kind of software pop up on my computer where, you know, I'm actually browsing, and then suddenly I get a pop-up that says your computer's been infected. Click here to find out how to resolve it. That's a type of scareware. So if you click on that, obviously, be careful. Be cautious when you click. So again, some tips to avoid malware: install virus software. Make sure your software is always up to date. Whenever you're installing software, make sure that it's set up to update on a regular basis. Only buy from trusted sources. Obviously, you want to be careful whenever you're downloading free software online, or if you're downloading any kind of software. Make sure you're buying it from a trusted source. Don't click on suspicious links. Never download unrecognized attachments, or if it looks like an attachment is coming from a trusted source, always verify. People's accounts do get hacked, so be careful. If anything looks funny, just don't download it. Respond to that individual, say, hey, did you mean to send this to me? Just wanted to verify so I don't download anything malicious. Install a firewall, and lastly, back up your data regularly. That way, if you're ever subject to some sort of a ransomware attack, you've always got a backup of your data that you can install once you've kind of cleaned out that particular ransomware problem. The last thing I want to talk about, PCI Compliance, and this is something that Audit Advantage has a lot of expertise in. It stands for PCI Compliance, and it's basically a set of standards and rules that individuals are required to follow whenever they're handling any sort of credit card information. And it's a requirement. And if you don't know about us, we have some tools that can help you out with that. But here's some of the most commonly overlooked requirements when it comes to PCI. As we work with individuals, sometimes they don't understand their scope. They don't understand, am I filling out the right questionnaire? Have I identified myself to complete the correct requirements to validate PCI? Secondly, make sure you know what kind of information you're storing on your computer. I think from when I talk to our PCI vendor, a lot of times folks don't think that they are storing any credit card information, but we have tools that you can scan your computers and your mobile devices with, and it will expose account numbers that you might be unaware of that exist on your computer. So talk to us about that after the meeting. Making sure you have updated policies and procedures, making sure that your equipment and even your internet jacks are all safe and secure so that somebody can't get access to your card environment or even to your network. Again, not keeping systems up to date. And then secondly, if you're using software to handle any transactions or anything like that, make sure that your service providers are all PCI compliant. Make sure that they're handling credit card information safely and securely, and they should provide you with any of that credit card or any of that PCI compliance information at your request. So tips to stay PCI compliant: use a trusted partner. Make sure that you're validating the right way. Make sure somebody walks you through understanding your scope, making sure you complete the right requirements. Check your statements for non-compliance fees. This is a big one. I mean, I can't tell you how many hundreds or even thousands of dollars merchants waste every single year paying PCI non-compliance fees. And it's almost a twofold problem for them, because not only are they not PCI compliant, but they're putting their business and their customers at risk, and they're paying these extra fees. So check your statements for those. Answer your questionnaire honestly so you can identify any shortcomings, and that you can fix those shortcomings, because all the all the credit card breaches that we see are a result of a merchant that was not PCI compliant. So again, make sure you validate PCI compliance. And then lastly, perform network scans. And we're going to talk to you about how we can help you schedule a scan of your network and identify any vulnerabilities or threats that might exist there. So let's review real quick. I wanted to put together what I thought were the top 5 things that you can implement today to make sure that you are more safe and more protected against these kinds of cybersecurity threats. First of all, start using password manager. If you guys aren't using something like LastPass to manage your passwords, I would highly recommend looking into something like that. I use it. It's been a savior for me. That way I don't have to use the same password across multiple sites. I never have to remember what my passwords are, anything like that. So check that out. Again, if you haven't already, install antivirus, anti-malware protection on all of your electronic devices, computers, mobile devices, servers, those kinds of things. Third, back up your data. Lastly, educate yourself and train your staff. You know, it's one thing for you to know what these kinds of threats are, but if you don't pass along this information to your staff or anyone that might be especially handling credit card information or transacting online, make sure that they're aware of these kinds of things. And then lastly, scan your network for vulnerabilities, okay? So that's a great segue. And as we wrap up here, I want to tell everyone that we're going to provide you with the complimentary network scan. So whether you are working from home, whether you're working from the office, let's find out if there's any vulnerabilities that exist on your computer. And the beauty of our scan is, although it's a scan of your IP address, it may pass as far as a PCI compliance perspective. But a lot of times what merchants don't understand is, even though they have a passing PCI scan, there may be underlying vulnerabilities that don't raise or aren't elevated to the level of being a more serious threat that might be plaguing their network, and that still could expose them to you know, some sort of a cyber attack. So write down this information, email us at info@getauditadvantage.com, or give us a call to schedule your free scan. We're going to provide those complimentary, so take a look at that. I know we've covered a lot of information. We're probably bumping up against time here, right, Brenda? But I wanted to open the floor up if anybody had any questions.
Yep, you've got 5 minutes, so you're good.
Perfect. I mean, does anybody have any questions? Or Brenda, I mean, are you checking out the comments section? I'm happy to jump in.
I am. Judy, you posted a comment over in the Whova app. Do you want to ask your question to Thomas directly? You posted a question for this session.
Can you repeat that? Because I just got, you know, a text message from work and
No, that's okay. You
Okay.
had posted a question in the Whova app for this session. Did you want to ask your question live about a to-do list or adding things to your to-do list? Or
how do you know when it's really the right compliance that you're answering? I feel that they're fishy. I mean, it's just, they're pesty, and I don't know where it's coming from.
Judy, are you talking about PCI compliance?
Correct.
Okay. So I think first of all, working with a trusted partner, and, you know, secondly, the scoping process, you know, can be confusing. And so I know with our merchants, we actually handhold them through the scoping process so that we can understand exactly how they are accepting credit cards. And, you know, there's a lot of times there's multiple ways that you're accepting credit cards. So that can actually cause you to move from, you know, one set of PCI requirements to another. So I would say if you're confused about how you're being scoped or whether you're completing the right questionnaire or which requirements, I would say either take a look at our particular program or reach out to your PCI vendor and say, look, I don't know if I'm scoping myself the right way, and I want to make sure I'm PCI compliant. And sometimes they can help you out, but if not, we've got a white glove PCI compliance program that's probably cheaper than the one you are already paying for with your processor. And we're glad to handhold you through that process. In fact, we can help you complete a lot of those requirements on your behalf with your consent. So does that help?
It does. It does. Unfortunately, you know, I don't know every aspect of the business, even though I should. But that's one of the things that my husband handles, is the credit card portion. And I think it's process point. But the emails just, it seems like you just get done doing it and they want you to do it again. And it's just a pain.
I totally get it. And here's what I'll say about that is I know PCI can seem like a nuisance, but just remember, I think the criminals and the the cyber attackers, they're always trying to stay one step ahead of the industry. So that's why PCI compliance isn't a one and done type of process. There are quarterly scans that typically need to be performed. There's questionnaires that have to be updated annually, and making sure you walk yourself through those questionnaires because yeah, the landscape is always changing, and it would just be a shame if people out there that were handling credit card information weren't up to date on the latest trends in the industry and kind of left themselves or their business or their customers in a vulnerable position.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I mean, if there aren't any questions, I'd love to hear maybe from a couple of people. Like, have you guys seen any of the types of cybersecurity threats that we've talked about today? And if so, tell me how it played out. What did it look like? Any kind of information we can share here in a forum might be helpful. I'd love to hear from maybe one or two people. I know we've only got a minute or two left, but does anyone want to jump in, make a comment, or take themselves off mute and share an experience? I know it might be embarrassing, but let's hear it. I know I've seen this stuff come across my email and text message.
Anybody?
Well, I can say that I have finally gotten kind of smart when I'm looking at those emails. Sometimes I click on them, but I don't click on what's inside of it because it's curious, as you explained in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But then I look immediately to the sender's domain, and a lot of times it's just it's laughable, and so then I know it's no good. But I've been very, very cautious as I manage my own email and then the store's email as well, because the employees won't click on anything. That's my responsibility to get rid of it before they even might do that. But they won't, I don't think any of them would do it without our permission. They only take orders. They only, answer emails that they're supposed to. But some of them are really hysterical if you read the email address that it came from.
I appreciate you sharing that, Judy. I mean, that's a great story. And, as these emails and any sort of spoofing or phishing strategies continue to go on, they're getting more and more sophisticated. In fact, even the email addresses that it looks like they're coming from, they can even be misleading. So beneath that, beneath the email address that it looks like shows up on your screen, it might actually look like it's coming from a legitimate source, whether it's, somebody you bank with or somebody you have a subscription with or any of those things. So it's not always going to be that straightforward, but yeah, you're right. A lot of times it is pretty laughable, and kudos to you for kind of catching those things before you clicked on them.
Well, I'm skeptical a lot of times because I specifically spell my name with an I. You don't want to hear that story. It's a long one. But I see a lot like, hello, Judy, with a Y. And so I'm like, you don't even know me. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. So I'm suspicious right away.
I'm going to jump in because we have 3 minutes before we get to the next session. TK, did you have a final thought? I saw you playing with your microphone. No, you're good. Okay. Well, thank you, Thomas. Everybody can chat with Thomas in the app. They can call Thomas. They can email Thomas. They can do all of those things if you guys have further questions. So thank you for attending, and thank you, Thomas, for doing this today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for joining. And hey, don't forget, we're gonna offer that complimentary scan. So if you're working from home or whatever, let's get it scheduled for you. There's no obligation, and we wanna make sure your networks are safe and secure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.